Welcome to the Empathic Mastery Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Moore, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we talk about what it means to be highly sensitive and empathic, how this impacts all aspects of our lives, and we explore tools, resources, and solutions so we can shift from absorbing all the thoughts, feelings, and energy of the world around us to being beacons for calm, love, and healing. Hey there, everybody. I am back with another episode of the Empathic Mastery Show. And today I have a really interesting guest, Amanda Kate. Amanda Kate is a self-mastery facilitator who flips the current paradigms of what it truly means to be a master of self. A committed student of energy and vibration, she uses her inner oracle sage and nurturing creativity to help people tap into their ability to move from victims of circumstance into divine, deliberate creation, allowing clients to tap into their innate, abundant nature from a place of full choice. Amanda Kate, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
I am delighted to have you here. And I mean, even just reading this very, very beginning part about going from being a victim of circumstance to divine, deliberate creation, I think that this is such an issue for so many people who identify as empaths and as highly sensitive people, as light workers, as people who want to be change agents in the world, that often I see there is definitely that tendency to feel like a victim of circumstance. So I would love to talk about that. And before we dive into all of that, I always like to start at the beginning about you. So please tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you identify as a sensitive person, as a magical person? What was your experience like? I know it's a long question, but let's start at the beginning.
I had that very, typical kind of childhood, but I was always told that I was too sensitive, that I needed thicker skin, that I couldn't take a joke, that, I was always off with the fairies. And there was always that kind of negative connotation to me being my truly sensitive self. And I could read the energy of rooms. I could feel it even when I, wasn't aware of feeling it. And so I knew when slight shifts happen and it would make me tense up. And I remember my mum saying, "You were always such a tired child." Now, as I've gotten into my adult healing, I've realized it's because I was so exhausted because I was always trying to manage the energy of rooms. And even now, when I fall into that, I notice that feeling of, oh, hang on, I'm trying to manage the energy in the room here. It's not actually my job.
Yes. I just was talking with a client of mine, mentee client of mine, and they had just come back from a family vacation gathering where they met with all the in-laws and spent a week in the chaos of the family system. And now this week they've just been home for a couple of days and they're like, "Why am I so tired?" And I'm like, "Because you were managing all this energy for a week that was just chaotic and crazy." Yeah.
And we often do it without recognizing that we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm at a point in my development now where I can feel that I'm doing it. And consciously now I step back and take a seat and go, "Not your problem, not your circus, not your monkeys." Just
my favorite saying,
hands off.
Yeah, I live by that saying, "Not your circus, not your monkeys." I think it's like every empath needs to memorize this over and over again. So at what point, so as a kid, you were having the experience of really taking on and trying to manage the energy and process it and subsequently being exhausted by it. What happened? Did it get a lot worse before it got better? At what point did you, I'd love to hear sort of that journey from just being unconsciously absorbing it to starting to recognize it. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Well, I had a few wake up calls, towards my late teens. I liked the idea of, getting into astrology and tarot, and I started getting curious. But being in a religious household, that's the occult, that's the devil's work. We can't go near that. And so I shut it down. And then, it kind of went through that period where I'd open it up and I'd start to dabble, and then I'd shut it down because people like us don't do that kind of thing. And when I look at the patterns that play out in my life and played out through my childhood, it always felt like it was my fault. It was my fault I was too sensitive. It was my fault I took things the wrong way. It's my fault, my fault, my fault. And it makes sense then why I married the kind of man that I did, where everything was my fault. And it was a highly emotionally abusive marriage, which I didn't recognize because it was my normal to be told everything was my fault, that it was my problem to deal with, that I took it the wrong way. Nobody in this ever stood up and went, yes, sorry, I was an asshole and offended you.
Yeah, they don't do that.
No, there's no responsibility. It's your fault, because that's easier for them to deal with. And so there was always this projection back onto me of my sensitivity. So I did always think that I was flawed in some way, that, oh yeah, I did take that the wrong way. So I was in this marriage for 13 years.
Wow.
Didn't realize, but what was happening is my health was getting worse and worse and worse. And I was seeing traditional medical practitioners, and they're going, well, you're the healthiest sick person we know, and there's nothing we can really do with you. And how about you try some antidepressants? And I'm like, because I'm not depressed. And not once did anyone ask me about support structures or what was going on in my relationships or anything underneath the surface, because that's not their wheelhouse. And so I kept kind of going, well, okay, I'm not well. I was taking 3-hour naps in the afternoon, which is just not normal. I was suffering for up to 14 days a month with my period. Like, there was all of these things physically going on, emotionally going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And that's when I really started to go into more the natural therapies. I started seeing a naturopath, and we cleaned up my diet. We worked on, not that there was much to clean up, but we got rid of gluten and reduced dairy and a few other bits and pieces, which started to make a difference. And realistically, it was just, as much as it was making a difference, there was still a lot of stuff going on under the surface that was just not right.
Yeah.
And I found kinesiology through that. So in Australia, it's more that energetic kinesiology. It was working on those underlying energy systems. And I remember my first session, the kinesiologist said to me, you have no idea how emotionally abused you are, do you? And immediately I went, oh yeah, in this relationship, I could number a few, but I did not recognize it in my marriage until later, about 4 months later or so. And then within 6 months or so, 8 months, I think it was, I had left that marriage.
Wow.
But it was this process of, I guess, waking up to the fact that I wasn't crazy. It wasn't just me. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't totally flawed.
Yeah.
That this actually was not okay by normal standards. And we don't like to use that word normal, but by healthy standards, it was
by
not
healthy
okay.
standards. That's yes.
And so that really, I guess, started on this massive path of healing, of understanding self, of then bringing that work into working with clients. And it led me then from kinesiology to other energy healing modalities, into archetypal life coaching, into all of these different things that I've now added and melded together, which I'm now writing into my own modality, way of healing, which is self-mastery facilitation. Because I think that's what I've really been living to these last 7 years, is that value of self-mastery. The more I can understand myself, the more I understand the world around me. The more I understand myself and have compassion for myself, the more I have compassion for people without me paying the price for my sensitivity, for my empathic nature, and for what other people are going through. I take on a lot less of what's not mine to take on.
Right. Well, and I think that there are so many people who, because of all the problems that are going on in the world, they bypass self-mastery and they focus externally. Like, if we can fix the problem outside of ourselves, if we can stop the war in XYZ country, if we can make sure that there, like, that somehow, if we can fix the external problem, that the internal issue is going to get, like, we don't have to worry about the internal. And yet you clearly grasped, I got to deal with this here and with me. I want to go back, though, because you said something that really kind of like rang my bell. And that was that you grew up in a conservative religious family.
Mm-hmm.
How did you, as you said, you started, like, you felt the call, you were pulled towards the mystical, you were pulled towards the tarot and astrology and everything, but you pick it up and then you put it down, and you pick it up and you put it down. Obviously, like, to go from coming from a family where we do not do that to where you are now, I'm imagining that there was a journey and some real reckoning with your own identity in order to do that. So I'd love to hear about, like, that journey or that pivot, and and if you had a struggle, like, to break free.
Still a struggle.
Yeah.
Let's face it. Look, I have realized that there is a certain band in which I can have a relationship with my mother and father. I have effectively been estranged from my sister for nearly 3 years because there are certain things that she will not respect with me, and I won't have that in my life. So I've chosen, look, I love her dearly. I do miss her. And also, it's that multiple things are true at the same time. I will not have people in my life that treat me that way. And that's okay. You know, I still love her dearly. I want what's best for her. I want to see her shine. And also, having her in my presence is not in my highest good. With my parents, like I say, there's a band of water we can swim in, and that allows us to have a relationship. I just keep things in that band, and things are all good. I then also have those people that I can do my deep dives with, that I can have my conversations with. But I think the thing to note is, if you imagine everybody in your, family of origin, I'm going to use 4 because it's easier. But if you imagine we're all holding up a table leg. And so when we have a death or divorce, everybody else who's left in the other corners when that other leg disappears tries to rebalance. And so they will take on certain parts of that role. I've walked away from the table. And so there's this idea that they, of course, want to pull me back in, and you can hold up your leg because you've actually not gone anywhere. And this is the role we expect you to play.
Right.
I'm just not getting involved. Your table, you guys hold it up. I'm still here. I'm happy to interact, but I will not hold up that leg of the table and play that role because that role is not mine. Right. And so, yes, there's been a lot of grief I've had to navigate, which has been very transformative. Grief about, who they are, what they've done, who I am, what I've done, all of the different facets and pieces that kind of mix together. Because I think that our true transformation only really comes when we do look at that grief of what could have been, what is, what should have been, the could have, should have, would have, all of that stuff. And who we were and who we felt we were perhaps forced to be or guided to be or encouraged to be, versus who we actually are, who we want to be, what our values are. And so it has been challenging. For a while there, I would step back in and I would hold up that corner of the table. And it's been a practice for me then to go, not my table, not my problem. Yeah. This is the table you've put me under. Yeah, I held up that role for as long as I could, and now it's just not right for me. And so I love my parents dearly. They love me dearly. And also I know where I can swim and where I can't.
Yes. Well, and I will say, in my experience, when I accepted my parents, and especially my father, for who he was, and I stopped trying to get him to be somebody else, my relationship with him dramatically changed. And the relationship really improved when I took the pressure off of my expectations of what I wanted it to be, and stepped out of the little girl fairy princess fantasy of, like, daddy, and just let him be a human being, warts and all, with his flaws. it really allowed it to be a much better relationship. I'm curious about, I'd love to hear about, like, it sounds like, I mean, you made a very deliberate choice to say yes to a path. What was that pivot like? Was it was it sort of like, I hear from so many creative people, sometimes it's like you can't not do it. Like, the music is burning in you, or the book is burning, the book wants to be written.
Yeah.
How did, what was it that, was it an abrupt, yes, or was it a slow incremental process? What led you to say yes to your path?
I think it was one of those things that had been building for a while. I had known for a long time that the marriage was not for me, that I needed to get out. I just didn't know how, because I was financially controlled. I was, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe I had any skills or any worth or anything. And the week that I finally made that decision, and obviously there'd been a lot of moments leading up to it, the marriage had gotten extremely toxic, extremely frightening to be in. What really happened was, within 2-3 days of each other, I had an appointment with my psychologist and one with my kinesiologist. And both of them said, in obviously very separate sessions, without talking to each other, both of them said, go home and look up narcissistic personality disorder, because we don't know that we can keep treating you until you have this awareness, and you're not coming to this awareness. And I went home and I was like, oh, okay, then this is big. I had always, and I still do, try to keep labels off people.
Yeah.
Labels are good so that we can identify the behavior patterns, how we can interact with them. It gives us information, but then it's take that label off and accept that this is just the person and this is how they operate.
Right.
That for me was this massive, I have been trying my hardest to change myself, to make this relationship work, to do all of the things that are within my power to do. Yet one person cannot be in a relationship on their own.
Right.
Being the only person who is trying to make it better, make it healthier, to make changes that are in everybody's highest good.
Right.
And it just got to that breaking point, having read that and gone, now I know what I'm dealing with. And it terrified me, because this is where I think we need to go into a bit of the nuance of energy work. And so people say you move towards what feels light and expansive and wonderful and happy and warm, and you move away from what feels contractive and cold and not great in your body and heavy. And leaving my marriage did not feel light and expansive and exciting and all of those things.
Thank you.
It was this cellular knowing that I have no other choice.
Yes.
So that is that aligned bravery that goes so much deeper than that surface. And yes, look, now when I feel into it, I can feel the light and the expanse and the all of those things. But at the time it was, I do not know how I am going to do this, but I have no other choice. I have to take that step forward.
Yes.
And I have to do this for me and for my children. And effectively for him as well, because he needs to have a chance to live his best life and find somebody who can love him the way he wants to be loved. It wasn't just about me and what I needed. It was about everybody involved in that situation, because it was serving none of us.
None of you. Yes. Oh, you've just dropped so many jewels here. And one thing that comes to my mind is, lately I've been thinking a lot about, there's times we cannot heal in a burning building. Like if you are standing in a burning building, there's there's just only so much recovery that anybody can do when you're consistently and just constantly being barraged over and over again. And I love that that revelation, like both your kinesiologist and your psychologist or psychiatrist were both like, hey, look up narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe you'll recognize somebody in that. But, and what a gift, what a miracle that you recognized that this was not working. You were able to say, oh, I'm only one part of this equation. I can't fix this on my own. And the only choice I have is to exit this. I love, love, love the words aligned bravery, because I think, and I love that we're talking about this, because I think you're right. I think a lot of people think that like transformation is going to somehow be like all like floating down, like, you know, finding the inner tube and floating down the wrap, you know, the stream of bliss. And a lot of times it really takes guts. It takes courage, and it takes going against everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything that you knew or you thought your identity was and your life was. It's like, it does take aligned bravery to step away. So I really appreciate that you're calling that up and out in this conversation.
Well, I think if we're only looking at the love and light aspects, we're looking at a one-dimensional life, and we're not here to have a one-dimensional life. We're here to experience contrast. And so if we're denying everything that is not love and light, we are missing most of life. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people in that spiritual bypassing, in the healing, in the coaching, in the whatever worlds, a lot of people are, well, let's just do this bit then, and let's manifest this, and let's whatever. But we need to accept, acknowledge, and feel everything to give our life depth and texture and color and contrast, and to feel, you know, we can only feel extreme grief if we have had extreme love. We cannot, we can't have one without the other. And what people want to do is live in this tiny little pod of their choosing, whatever that be, of just, I have so many clients who come in, I just want to be happy. Well, bland. So what, you just want to be happy? I'm sorry. But in those cases, if you are just happy, then you actually do need medication because you're manic, and we need to go a little bit, you know, like if you're wanting to live a one-dimensional life, you're wanting to deny the multifaceted multi-dimension that we are here to experience. And it's just not right. Who said that life is meant to be easy?
Yes.
Life is going to throw shit at us.
Life is going to throw, I mean, if we're doing it right, life is going to throw shit at us.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's, and even if we're doing it wrong, life is still going to throw shit at us. And, you know, the other part of it is this idea that happiness is the end all and be all, that happiness is the goal. And that
so
somehow if we're not happy, I mean, there are so many other things that have so much more depth in some ways than happiness. You also have spoken and mentioned the word grief. And what's so fascinating, I was literally working on editing the manuscript of my book that will be coming out fairly soon after this podcast episode airs. And in it, and it's a channeled book where my guides are speaking, and they talk a lot about grief. And they talk a lot about, and they, you know, the message, it's just interesting, the synchronicity, because one of the things they say is grief and love are in direct proportion to each other. They're in a direct relation to each other. It's like grief only arises out of love. It never arises out of anything else.
Yeah.
But we have to feel the grief and the unwillingness as a culture to feel grief. I mean, it's amazing how avoidant we are.
Grief is also only seemingly okay when somebody's died. But grief comes through divorce. It comes through losing a job. It comes from losing your purpose. It comes from losing parts of yourself. It comes from denying parts of yourself. It comes from situations not working out the way we had hoped. Like, grief comes in so many different ways and so many different forms. And as we become more okay with that, you know, in leaving my marriage, yes, there was a lot of joy. There was a lot of freedom. There was a lot of, relief. But I also had to grieve who I was going in, who he was, who we'd promised that we could be for each other. I had to grieve all these different little aspects to truly heal from that. And it wasn't about grieving him. You know, he's still doing the best he can with the tools he has. He absolutely is. He doesn't at the moment know any better. And hopefully when he knows better, he will do better, because that tends to be the way things work. If it's not his lifetime too, then none of us are here to control that.
Right.
And we're not, God, infinite intelligence, source, whatever you want to call it. But there is possibility that he could find the healing, heal, and make his life absolutely phenomenal. And I pray that for him. And yet the experience I had was not that.
Right.
It could have been, but I wouldn't be where I am. He wouldn't be where he is. Our kids wouldn't be where they are. Like, nothing would be the same had that happened. And there is grief in that process.
Yeah.
And there is grief in the parts of me. You think about even when we become, for those of us who have, or who have chosen to, or who have been lucky enough to, depending on the circumstance, to have children, we are so excited about, often excited about being pregnant, getting pregnant, having a baby, all of that stuff. How often do we actually take time to grieve the woman who died, who is never not going to be a mother again?
Right.
And yet we need to, because that is a massive life transition, and all of these different life transitions need to be processed. And grief is one of the aspects that we need to move through, to explore, to navigate as we're going through all these different transitions.
So how do you move into and navigate the grief?
For me, it depends on what type of grief it is.
Okay.
Because it depends on the situation. And I think it's, as with most healing for me, it's kind of laying everything out on a table. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, and kind of going, oh, that's true. Because what we want to do is we just want to compartmentalize and go, well, I'm grieving this. But realistically, in that grief, as you say, you've got to bring in the love, you bring in different experiences, you bring in different perspectives, stories. And when we lay them all out and we can hold them easily and go, okay, all of that's true. I can hold love for everyone in my life who has abused me, and also wrath, which I love, by the way. It's one of my favorite emotions, wrath. Wrath for me is justified anger. So it doesn't have the hot burning of rage. It doesn't have the need for projecting out as some other angers do. Wrath just sits in me quite comfortably going, I do not condone those behaviors and I will not have that in my life. Yet I can still hold the love for them at the same time, that they are a soul being doing the best they can with the tools they have in this 3D reality that we're choosing to be incarnate in right now.
Yeah.
And they can sit really comfortably together.
Yes.
And this is, I actually put out a podcast, it'll be a while ago now, but about that forgiveness is a bit of BS, because forgiveness doesn't come into the equation. It's not about forgiveness. It's actually about, can I hold these seemingly conflicting ideas? Can I hold this paradox easily within my hands and be just okay with it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what the healing is.
The definition of forgiveness, like what people perceive to be forgiveness. I started doing a deep dive a while ago on the concepts of forgiveness and the definition of the word. And one of the things that I really found that really rang true to me about forgiveness is it's the disengaging from, it's like the forgiving of the debt. It's the disengaging of the hurt and the things that are keeping us stuck. And for me, forgiveness is not, like, I see it as like you can have wrath and you can have love. And forgiveness is simply that acceptance of what is, and not trying to make either one, like not trying to make it be something different than it is. It's just like, I forgive this, like I accept this. For me, forgiveness is much more about acceptance. Yeah. And I think so many people perceive forgiveness as somehow letting people off the hook. If I forgive them, that they will no longer be accountable. And I'm like, oh no, hells no. Like,
that's where I love my wrath.
It's like there's an Akashic record that is saying that this person did this thing, and no amount of me being like, I forgive you and I release you is going to stop the karma of the choices that they made.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love your explanation of wrath. That is so beautiful. Versus, we talked a little bit before we turned on the recording about resentment. And what a different kind of anger than wrath. And how often empaths and highly sensitive empathic people can get themselves caught up in that resentment.
One of the biggest learnings I had, and I think it came from Brené Brown's research, was that resentment does not belong to the anger family. It belongs to the envy family.
Ooh.
That changed everything for me. So I recognized that because resentment's my go-to. Resentment was what my mother modeled. It was always that, kick the cat. I've always got it worse than everybody else. And often when we're martyring, we don't recognize that we're martyring, but we will see it in other people. Oh, they're martyring themselves again. But that resentment is one of those things now that is a massive telltale for me. What am I not giving myself in this moment? And the best example I have is, because I work from home now, I come out of my clinic, I'm going to make dinner for everybody, and everybody else has come home and they're on their screens and they're having their rest and relaxation because they've had a hard day. And I'm going, that resentment starts to build. Now, in that moment, because it's so familiar and I feel it, I can take a step back again. Okay, right now, I have that resentment because I want to sit down, because I too have had a hard day. Now, what that then does is put me into choice. I am the best cook in the house. I actually cook dinner with love. Other people don't use love when they're cooking their meal, and I don't particularly like eating meals that aren't created with care and love and
eating a meal that's consciousness. Like, oh, do I have to?
Yeah, it's that energy goes in and it's just not nice. So I make a choice. Then I go back into choice because I've felt that resentment and I know what I want and I know what I'm looking for. Now, I could go and sit down for 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long, and rest and relax, recuperate, etc. And if people came up to me in those moments and I said, well, if you're hungry, start making it, I'm sure they would, because they're all very capable people in this household. However, I know that I create better meals.
Yes.
So my choice becomes, okay, yeah, I could sit down now and get what I need, or I can make dinner. And then it's hands off. Everybody else, you're very capable. Go do the dishes. I'm now sitting down. It's my turn. Yeah. And most nights that is then what I choose. Yeah. But it puts me into choice. And anytime I feel resentment, I know it's because somebody else has what I want.
Yes.
So how do I then flip the table, flip the story to go, what then can I do? What am I in control of to even this out so that I am not feeling that resentment? Because it's nobody else's job to sort out my resentment for me. But what happens when I don't catch it is then everybody else gets that meal with the energy in, and they're having to eat that. And that's not fair on them. They haven't asked for it. That's my stuff.
Right.
And so it's like, no, actually, where do I go into choice? And that's part of that power of recognizing, how do those emotions feel in my body? What is the cause of them? Can I acknowledge that they're there and validate their being? And then I move into choice. What do I want to do with this? Because that's where I find my power.
Well, and I'm imagining as you're talking that this is in many ways an example of moving from victim of circumstance to divine deliberate creation, where you are and recognizing that choice. As you spoke, I had this realization that in my experience, resentment is almost always about the things I'm not asking for.
Yeah.
The idea that I'm expecting somebody to just automatically know. I had a friend for years who would talk about the things that weren't happening in her partnership. And she'd be like all pissed that her husband wasn't doing XYZ. And I'd be like, did you ask him? Yeah. And she never did. Like it was this thing where it was like she assumed that he would just somehow know. And it was kind of like, did you ever ask for it? Did you ever actually articulate that this is what you need? And I think for myself, I've noticed that resentment is almost like a check engine light or a a barometer for my own avoidance of expression, my own not articulating what's really going on. And like, I don't even know, I'm like, I may not be owning it myself, much less expressing it to somebody else. But I love how you're, just the idea of resentment it's more about envy than it is about anger. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I want what you've got. You're relaxing, you're doing this, you're doing that. But again, as you say, it's not me voicing my needs. One of the biggest ahas for me was recognizing that nobody else is actually a mind reader.
Yes.
And actually, neither am I. Nobody is a mind reader.
Nobody is a mind reader.
If we're expecting other people to know our wants and needs, we have an unrealistic expectation of them. And that's not fair to them. We're putting something on them that they cannot do. So we're setting them up for failure.
Right.
And that's not fair. No. I recognized it when I was coming home from work and I'd be in a grumpy mood or whatever, and I'd be taking it out on the kids. And all of a sudden I thought, well, they don't know what my day's been like. And so I then would go in and go, look, guys, I had a really rough day. I'm a bit tired. I might need a bit more help tonight, whatever it was. And then most of the time, the night then went without a hitch because I'd spoken it. It was out there. And actually, just in saying it, I then actually needed less help because I'd recognized that I was tired and it had come out. If I did happen to get grumpy or what have you, often one of the kids would say to the other one, well, she warned us. It wasn't an unexpected me just losing it over something small. It was, well, she is tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, where do we go from here? There are just so many amazing. Actually, I have a story you reminded me of. Yes. I'll keep it short. But many years ago, I had a friend who was a Cancer and, in the zodiac, and really tended to emote quite a bit and brooded quite a bit, but also did not express themselves a lot. And one time we had a situation we were supposed to meet at a restaurant and then go to the movie. I was running 15 minutes late because the situation came up at home, and that was I just couldn't avoid it. I called her home number. I called her cell phone. I called everywhere to try to let her know that I was running late. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes late. She was nowhere to be found. So I call her on my cell phone in the parking lot, and I'm like, hey there, what happened? Where were you? She's like, I was there. You didn't show up. I was like, I was 15 minutes late. I tried to call you. And she was like, well, you didn't show up. And she was just really deeply resentful. And I just sort of was like, what's going on? Are you really angry? Like, are you upset with me? And her answer was, you should know. And I was like, I know. Going through right now. Like, I was 15 minutes late. I made every effort to tell you that I was going to be late because something had come up for me. You're not. But it was so fascinating because to me, it was like she was going through such an emotional turmoil inside of herself that she just imagined that I would, of course, know that she was in this state, and that, of course, I would understand why she felt the way she did. I still, to this day, don't fully understand exactly what was going on with her because I was just like, it was kind of like I just happened to be kind of randomly arriving into her world in her life, and no idea, just no idea. And I do think that empaths especially, sometimes we imagine, like you said, we're not mind readers, but I think because we can be so sensitive to other people's energy and people's needs and to managing the energy of the room, we often will sometimes do the things, like meet the needs, try to accommodate. And a lot of times we hit the mark, like we will do what people need, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can know. And especially, people cannot necessarily know what's going on for us. It's so incredibly important to share it.
Well, I think one of the really vital things to look at, and it comes directly, I guess, from that story, but also what you said after about us reading the room. Most empaths, I can't say all, but most empaths have grown up in some form of unpredictability.
Yes.
It is a trauma response. It is actually a learned skill. And people are I was just born an empath. It's because these behaviors were developed before you had conscious awareness of them. My mother was quite explosive. I completely understand why. I was very similar because of the stress I was under and the hormones and all the things. So I get it. No judgment there. But because her explosions terrified me, I was watching her behavior like a hawk, trying to keep her happy, trying to people please, trying to make things everything, you know, trying to be the good girl, trying to do everything in my power that I could to stop that explosion. So empathy is often a trauma response to something that we cannot control outside of ourselves that frightens us. For me, it was that screaming, yelling, you know, back in the day, you know, we'd get a smack for not a lot because it was the wrong time of the month or whatever. Now, like I say, there's no judgment to my mother. I completely understand it. However, for me in that child role, I took on management of her emotions because I didn't want her to snap, to then be screamed at, shouted at, smacked, all those things that terrified me as a child. So empathy is that learned response. And when we start to recognize that, we can start to reverse engineer and use our empathy as a superpower. Whereas most people still use it as that, oh, I'm an empath. It's again going into that victim mentality. Well, there's nothing I can do about this. Well, hang on a minute. If you start to recognize the people pleasing behaviors you're falling into, the rescuing that you are falling into, all of those things that you are trying to do to influence somebody else so that you don't get the reaction that you don't want, we can then go one step before that. What are you not giving yourself that is making you think that this is the right way forward, that is making you think you're going to keep yourself safe? It's a survival response.
Yes.
So they've just added into the survival response, not just fight and flight and freeze, but fawning.
Fawn. Yes.
The reason they put fawning in is, as with most research, it was done by males on males.
Right.
But a very normal response for women in stress responses is to fawn, is to try and please people around them so that they are accepted by the tribe, as in we are all tribal creatures. That's how we grow. Without belonging to the tribe, we get cast out into the wilderness to die. Our brain still goes, this is a live or die situation. If I'm not accepted by these people around me, I will be cast out and I will die. So that's our way of not being cast out. It's our way of being accepted. Now, as we start to manage and work with those energies and start to understand, okay, this is what I'm doing, even us trying to manipulate the energy in a room is us rescuing, it's us fixing, it's us people pleasing, it's falling into those habits that are not nourishing for ourselves.
Right.
So when we recognize our energy is starting to do that, that conscious stepping back and going, hang on a minute, let me just pull this in. Let me see what's going on for me in this moment that I feel I have to do that. And then everything changes. And yes, we can use it to read other people's behavior. We can use it to go, okay, what's the situation here? We can use it for those really positive, beautiful qualities that it gives us. But all of a sudden, we start to lose the exhaustion. We start to lose that lack of choice. We start to lose the automatic behavior of everybody's more important than me. I'm less important. I don't matter. Everybody else, you know, this inferiority, superiority BS that we build our life around. We start to even the playing field. What I need in this moment, what is in my highest good? How can I then make my life better while still noticing all this stuff around me? And how then do I want to influence the situation? All of a sudden, we are in power. We are not disempowered, and we're not in victim.
So do you give us an example? And I was thinking in some ways, as you were speaking about, it's a learned response, but it's so deeply in. It's like if you start taking ancestral trauma into consideration, as well as karmic trauma, it's sort of like there's a point at which it's like, it's not just about this lifetime, but it can be inherited, this inherited sensitivity that we develop. And I've noticed that when we are, and one of the things that I've often said is that We feel better as empaths if we cannot hold space for discomfort for ourselves, then we can't hold space for discomfort for other people.
Mm-hmm.
We feel better when other people feel better. And so we will often try to fix if we cannot allow it to simply, if discomfort to simply be, which, as you were saying, we're holding on to trying to create that little tiny bubble of happy, it means that we're going to try to control a whole lot of other stuff. And I've noticed that then it's like we will extend our awareness out in order to try to control and try to feel safe. I'd love to, you talked about reverse engineering. I'd love to hear, like, if you could run us through a real concrete example of reverse engineering the empathy in the limited amount of time we have left right now. Yeah.
I'm going to use an example of rescuing.
Yes.
Because I think it just gives, it's the same kind of thing, whether we're doing it through empathy, through people pleasing, through anything. When we have been face down in the muddy pile of crap and nobody's been around us, guess when we found our tools? We've had something drop in, we've had a name drop in, we've had, you should go and see so-and-so for a healing, whatever it is. Because there's nobody around us yanking us out of the puddle and cleaning us off. What we do is we see somebody else trip and fall in that puddle and we rush in, we pick them up, we clean them off, everything's okay, you're fine. What we have done in that moment is we have disempowered that person. We have taken their power away. We've said, I can fix this. And it puts us into a sense of superiority. Aren't we good? We've got the answers here. And so rather than feeling like the victim, we get to feel like we're a bit superior and we've got the answer. And isn't this wonderful? But what we've done in that moment is, I don't trust you. You don't have the tools. We've disempowered them.
We have disempowered them.
And once we realize that, now they can't find their tools because they're not face down in the puddle long enough. They're not face down in their own BS and able to gain any perspective, able to have the tools, able to have the drop-ins that you need to then get yourself out of that puddle. The other story that I share is the archetypal story of Jesus. We all carry the cross of our own destruction on our back and we all get nailed to it at some point. Now, at the bottom of that cross was Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, his mother and his lover. They did not try and crawl up the cross and pull the nails out and all of that. They stood there and they watched as he was being tortured, spat on, jeered, just as he died.
Yeah.
And they loved him and held space for him and just stood there because they knew that that was his journey to go through and it was not their journey to interfere.
No, they bore
that is the heroine's journey. And people do not talk about that heroine's journey. They talk about the hero's journey. They talk about us carrying our cross and being nailed to it and going into the cave and, dying and then being reborn and taking that wisdom out into the world and all of that stuff. But what they do not talk about is that heroine's journey where we are so okay in ourself that we can hold space for other people as they suffer. An example of this, my kids went through some really big stuff, as kids do, because they're learning and they're on this journey called life. And it was one of those moments I'm like, just tap me and I'm ready to go, I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yet what I did instead was I sat back and I said, I trust you. You've got this. I'm here. I have some tools. I can get you whatever help you need. I am here for you. But I know in this moment, deeper than I think you do, you've got this. You know the answers. You know what is right for your life. So I'm ready to be tapped in, but I trust you. Now, for me to do that, I was watching myself in this going, holy hell, that's pretty good. Pretty impressed with myself. Thank you very much. But the way they have grown and flourished since then, the conversations we have had, the depth of our connection now is so different because I was able to take that role and stand in that space of the divine feminine and hold space for them. And that's the role I have to play with my clients because realistically, they don't have me in their pocket 24/7.
No.
And so they've got to navigate life on their own. Now, if they're paying me to give them the tools. That's, our exchange. That's fine. Right. That's not me rescuing them.
No, that's giving them tools that then they have to pick up and use.
Exactly. Yeah. My job is to stand and hold space.
Yes.
And sometimes my job is just to stand and hold space while other people fall apart and to not rush in and go, here's the answers, because that's not my job.
Well, even in your story, they probably have been thinking she's in a relationship with a narcissist and like doesn't even realize it. But they waited until the point where you were ready to hear it. They waited for that moment where they were just like, here's a breadcrumb, do what you will with it. Mm-hmm. And, and so there is that too, the timing of things, the readiness of things when people are there. Amanda, I told you we'd get to this point where I would basically say, oh my God, I cannot believe how fast the time has gone by. This conversation has just been so like delicious. It has just been like, it's just been such a nourishing, wonderful conversation. I really have appreciated every second of it. What else? What would you absolutely kick yourself if you did not share it?
I think it's letting everybody know that they can step out of that victim mode.
Yeah.
It's that aligned bravery. Okay, this feels scary before we walk through. And, some of my healing sessions that I've personally been through have felt huge and scary. And I don't want to walk into this because I don't want to see it. But as I've walked through and come out the other side, I'm like, oh, that wasn't nearly so bad as I thought it would be. And now I'm a different person having come through this. The more we can own our story, the more we can understand the trauma behaviors that set us up for whatever behaviors it is that we're exhibiting in the world, the more that we can just sit with who we are in this world and accept that that's where we're at, then the more we can go into that deliberate choice and deliberate creation for our future, the more we can go, okay, I see all of this stuff that is true. It's all true. I don't need to filter this. Okay, I'm not going to go vomit it over everyone, but I can see all of this stuff that's sitting there. Oh, okay. Yeah. Now what am I going to choose to do with it?
And I'm not going to go vomit it all over everybody else. Like that is another piece of it, is like the ability to hold the space, to look at the whole table and just be like, yep, it is a hot mess here.
Yeah.
And and I don't have to be a drama queen about it. I don't have to impose, like I don't have to Debbie Downer all over everybody about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing we do, and I know we're getting, about this, so it's not going to come as a total surprise. But every single episode, what I love to do is a little bit of a time travel exercise. I really believe that podcasts exist outside of time, and that they are like, the broadcast is like a stone that gets dropped in the river of time, and it ripples both ways. And so we can not only send messages way into the future, but we also can send messages back to a time where we need it. So what I want to do with you is I want to go back to a time where young, whatever age Amanda Kate was, that really needs to hear something, really needs to know something. And instead of it being what would you tell? I would tell her this. I want to hear you speak directly to her. We're going back. We're going to talk to her. So where are we going? When are we going? And what are we telling her? What does she need to hear?
I tried not to put too much thought into this because I wanted my subconscious to kick it up.
Yeah.
The age 13 is the first age that came in, really. Yeah. I have no clue why. But it's saying to her, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken.
There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. What an incredibly important message, especially in a family system where you're dealing with a volatile mother and dealing with people who are telling you you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, you need to develop a tougher skin, suck it up. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken.
And it's something I've had to remind myself throughout my healing journey is there is nothing wrong with me. I am not broken. I am a sum total of everything that's happened to me, everything I've perceived has happened to me, everything I thought has happened to me, every story I've kept as true, everything I've discarded as false. Like I'm the sum total of all of it.
Yeah.
And it's our job through our healing is to go back and find all those pieces of ourselves that we've suppressed or repressed or hidden away or denied, and allowing them back into the fold.
Yes.
It's going, oh, okay, this is the gift, this is what you are. This is what you've given me. Okay.
Yeah.
You're part of what makes me whole. We are born perfect creatures. The idea is that they should just be able to unfold, and we should be held lightly to allow us to unfold. But most people, when they have a child, think it's a lump of clay and they need to shape it and mold it to fit certain things that society deems acceptable. But we are already born with our purpose, with our essence, with what we're here to do. And if we were held more lightly to be able to just unfold, yes, we need guidance. Yes, we need watering. Yes, we need sustenance. But if we could just allow ourselves to unfold. And I think the harder thing as we get through the journey is, of course, that clay is sometimes hard to unmold, and we're trying to work out, do I just smash through this? Do I get rid of it?
Yeah.
But again, that's all part of the magic of this journey of discovery.
Yeah. Helen, I see so often, and it's so easy to see it in other people when the narrative is so incredibly critical and when they're questioning themselves and they're doubting themselves. And it just like so often, if we could just grant ourselves mercy and grace, and if we could just allow ourselves to be tender with the tender parts of ourselves, but also trusting that if we're not there yet, that maybe it's because it's not time to be there. And going back to the earlier part of the conversation about the exhaustion, with this client of mine who just spent the week with crazy family, this was a week of contrast and a week of like, oh my God, the cognitive dissonance going on here is insane. And like, if anything, I see it as like massive amounts of growth and leaps forward over the course of this period of time, because there were so many examples of like dissonance and recognizing it. I'm like, no wonder you're exhausted this week. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just bouncing back from a week of an incredible amount of mental and emotional and psychic exertion.
Yeah.
Of course you're going to be here. And yet it's always easier to see it in somebody else than it is to grant it to ourselves.
And that's why it's a practice.
Yeah.
That's why it's a spiritual practice. It's a self-care practice. It's because we're not just able to do it.
Oh.
It's that constantly, and this is where I think self-care and self-love is so bastardized on social media, because
it's not chocolate and bubble baths, honey.
As much as that's lovely, and let's face it, we all love chocolate and a bubble bath, or we all love a massage. We all love that stuff. We all love those healings that are just literally we sit and we receive the healing. But unless we are taking an active part in our healing, we're never actually going to make those steps forward. And the idea is we need to have strong standards of how we expect to be treated. We need to treat ourselves according to those standards. We need to have strong values of how we're going to navigate in the world. We need to put boundaries in place where people are not respecting our standards and values. And we need to do all of that with kindness and compassion and love for ourselves, that we're doing the best we can in any given moment of time. And if we could have done better, guess what? We'd have done better. Or we'd have done differently. And so it's taking those value judgments off ourselves to go, you should have known better, you should have done better. Well, if I could have accessed that part of my brain, guess what? I would have done it. I couldn't in that moment because I was in fight and flight, or I was falling, or I was doing something else. I was in a different part of my brain. So of course I can't access my full range of tools in that moment.
Right.
Even when I've been screaming at my children and passing on that same, which hasn't happened in a lot of years, by the way. But, even when I've been screaming at my children and losing my nut at them, I've still been doing the best I can in that moment.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is when I come out of that moment and I'm like, oh, that wasn't my best me. How do I then repair that? Why did I choose to go down that path? What was I not doing for myself? This is where self-reflection comes in, and self-responsibility. It's looking at what was happening to me leading up to that. Why did I feel like that therefore was my only choice? How did I feel backed into a corner in that moment? What was going on? What's the bigger picture here? that's when we actually start to grow and change and exhibit the work that we are doing in this world.
Yeah. The willingness to act from aligned bravery.
Mm.
I just, it feels like aligned bravery is the theme of this whole episode.
Mm.
Okay, final question for you, Amanda Kate. How do people get in touch with you?
So easiest place is my website, which is amandakate.com.au, the AU obviously for Australia. All of my social links are there. I'm on most of the platforms, some sporadically, some more regularly.
I feel you, sister.
My book is available where you get most books. It is Divine, Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence. There are 2 more books in the pipeline. What happens with them? Who knows? They'll come out when they're ready. I am also in the midst of writing my own self-mastery facilitation certification program. I run group mastery sessions, which are personal self-mastery and self-mastery in business. So I take spiritual and soul-based entrepreneurs and work with them through the 7 pillars of self-mastery. And in the personal group, we work through it from a more personal perspective. But as you know, when we're working on one facet, we're working on the whole anyway. But it just takes a slightly different focus. And those groups are, rolling. So they're at the moment 12-week programs. I'm not sure if that'll shift or change. But they're happening regularly. So yeah, just come over to the website, check it out, take what resonates, leave the rest.
Awesome. And so amandakate.com.au. And I also, guys, it will be in the show notes. Come on over to empathicmasteryshow.com to find that. And it will also include a link for Amanda Kate's book. And so that you can go grab a copy because it sounds like a delicious book. Amanda Kate, thank you so much for this conversation. This has just been, it's been soul food.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for the light you're bringing into the world. We need it. So thank you. Appreciate you.
As we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear what you're taking from this show. Please jump over to empathicmasteryshow.com to leave your comments. In the show notes, you'll find a link to grab your copy of my Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. And while you're there, please subscribe and follow this show. And thank you for your help sharing this show with the people who need it. Please help me to spread the word and send this podcast to friends or family members who need support living as highly sensitive empathic people. Then join me again when the next Empathic Mastery Show airs. Okay, one last time. Hop over to empathicmasteryshow.com for your Empathic Safety Guide. And until next show, shine on. We need you and your gifts here on this planet. So please don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards.